Good afternoon, everyone. Lucky last before lunch, so we are privileged to have Kylie Watson here today to talk about hidden traps, how to make sound cyber decisions amid the chaos in IR. Kylie is from DXC, and she's a cybersecurity sociologist and is the head of cybersecurity at DXC for Australia and New Zealand, which involves managing hundreds of security specialists and embedding security throughout a vast number of complex projects, as well as leading security incident response. A sought-after author and speaker, Kylie has appeared in the Australian Financial Review, the AFR, the Sydney Morning Herald, and industry media, and at AUSCERT on many occasions, attracting great feedback, a regular here at the show. Last year, she published a paper on motivations of cyber criminals for an international peer-reviewed cyber journal and has made submissions to government on cyber matters, including digital identity legislation, the SOCI amendments, open data and release legislative reforms paper. She's a specialist in the human-centric side of cybersecurity, making sure that the technical and people side are always integrated. Kylie has qualifications in cybersecurity, data risk, teaching, management, and sociology, as well as numerous certifications in cloud. So if you could please join me in welcoming Kylie to stage.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. A slight correction, I'm actually the APJ MIA Head of Security, which will become a little bit relevant when I talk about just the sheer scale of incidents that we're involved in. So to give some context, right, because I'm giving you some insights from what I see, but what do I see, and what is the authentication or validation of what I'm telling you? DXC operates in over 70 countries. I look after over 20 of those. We have over 130,000 employees, and we've got significant security teams. The coolest thing is the tech platforms and the security services. We look after infrastructure, data, apps, and security across all of those is really, really able to be quantified when you think about the fact that the glasses I'm wearing right now were manufactured in China, but we do have a security operations centre that looks after that particular manufacturer. The car that I drive is underpinned by DXC technology in the manufacturing plant. The makeup that I'm wearing, without giving any clues because I'm worth it, is underpinned by DXC technology. The electricity, most of the electricity companies, we underpin their technology across the region in some way. And it goes through to banking. And I'm going to put it out to you that all of you encounter something that we underpin with technology and have a security element in at least 5 times a day. And I'd even go as bold as to say up to 10. So when you look around all the things that you've got and all the brands, your clothing, everything that you've got, we are a part of the technology footprint and the security behind most of that. And all of that is huge, and all of that requires, at times, incident response, right? There are escalations and P1s and P2s in my life quite a lot. Probably more than what I'd like, but that is the reality. So I've collected some insights from that for you and blended, as I like to do, the human side of it, because I see so much about the tech side of it that I really think it's important that we have a look at the integration of the human, because the tech doesn't stand alone without the humans. So if we have a look at the landscape, last week I was with a significant government provider and they said, we want to go back to on-prem. We don't like this cloud thing, it's a bit scary, we want to go back to on-prem. And I was shocked because I've not really heard that before. So you can see the environment is challenging and people are really starting to rethink their strategies. The increasing threat, we can see with AI in particular, the bad guys are getting smarter. How we work is challenging and different, like there's an increased threat environment. Too many stovepipes. So we've seen Splunk and Cisco over the last few weeks with their merge, and we've seen Palo Alto and QRadar with their merge. There's a lot of consolidation occurring because the landscape is very scattered and there's a lot of vendors. And and the skill shortage. And that's the particular one that I struggle with, because I do have to get hold of highly secure, really good technical people, and it's really hard to find them, particularly across the region. So to give that a bit of perspective, when I first started in cybersecurity, I was able to be across almost every compromise, every incident. And now they're happening so thick and fast, and I think you all see this yourselves, that you can't be across everything. So Medisecure is happening, right as we speak. We all know about, Medibank, Optus, Uber, Channel 9, Latitude, but what you might not know is that in 2024, so far, 36 billion known records have been breached. 36 billion known records, right? That's just what's been reported. And almost 10,000 publicly disclosed incidents have been reported. And 10,000 actually doesn't seem a lot to me in the environment that I'm in, but it is a lot, isn't it? So, if we then go on and have a look at the behavioural science aspect of it, there's significant pressure. So from a behavioural perspective, this environment is stressful. People turn over every 2.5 years, particularly in the CISO positions. People move quite frequently in our industry. I stood up here last year, the year before that, and I said there's not enough being done in psychology, in human behaviour, and the integration of that with cybersecurity. So I did a bit of a scan and I had a look, and there's been 300 actual academic articles that have been published on human behaviour and cybersecurity in the intersection of that in the past 20 years. If you have a look, more than half of them came out in the last 5 years. I'd like to think that's a lot more conversation and driving. And if any of you saw Gartner 2 years ago, they finally came up with a trend being human-centered security design is a thing, right? And I was so relieved, because I was like, thank goodness we're starting to focus on that human side in cybersecurity. We all saw it with change management and things in IT, about 5 or 10 years ago, but now we're starting to actually understand that humans are so critical to what we do in the process. And the research from a behavioural science perspective shows that when humans are under stress, they don't make good decisions, right? When we're highly emotional, we don't make good decisions. How many people here have written an email in anger and then not sent it? Yeah? It's because, why? Why haven't you sent it? Yeah, you've got it out, right? You've got the emotional sort of angst out. But it wouldn't be good to send it, right? So that was a good decision to not send it. But we do find in the heat of the moment, in incident response, that people in cybersecurity are having to make rational, good decisions. But it's not the ideal environment for that from a human behavioural perspective. And then we know that forensically we're potentially going to be put on the hook for those. It could get in the media for some of the decisions we've made. And so it becomes even more complex and challenging, and I'd say a little bit scary. So if we have a look then at what we actually do in my team, we've got the reactive and the proactive. I think we all know the proactive. I think all of us are in that defence space and trying to prepare as much as we can. And then there's the actual incident response that we get called into. We've seen in our team across globally a 300% increase in people picking up the phone and saying we need to help in incident response. We've engaged in 2 to 5 ransomware incidents per year. This is globally. Significant ransomware incidents that you would be able to Google and look up. We assist all industries, as I mentioned before, that 5 times a day, and we are multi-geography. We're, like I mentioned before, we're in a lot of countries. In particular, I'm sitting here trying to scan and get across all the countries that I'm looking after as well. And these are severe incidents that we get called in for. And the people in the incident response team are over 250 people that we've got who are actively responding to incidents in our teams. So that's quite a lot of stress in our teams, but it shows you the sheer scale of what's going on at the moment. And so some of those things give me some insights that I can share with you. So we usually get called into large international organisations. Regions impacted, you can see there, complete denial of service, encrypted servers clients, usually several hundred. Collateral impact. So on systems that weren't actually directly impacted but have a dependency, and then of course on the business where they haven't really thought that through. Case is usually 1 to 2 days old before we get called in, so everyone's kind of been faffing about a bit and having a bit of a panic about what they need to do. The team's already stressed out. You can see the maturity of the organisation from just coming in and seeing the team. Disorder. People can't answer the questions. We go, where are the systems hosted? Who is responsible? What is the patch level? What's your Active Directory design? And what's your backup availability? And they have to go, oh, I don't know, I've got to ask this person or that person. It's just not clear, and it should be clear, right? But it's not. General decisions still need to be made on ransomware payment. Now, I know the government doesn't advocate ransomware payment. I can tell you the reality for the organisations I deal with have policies about whether they pay it or not based on the impact it's going to have on their critical assets and the potential financial impact and the stock market. So yes, there are people out there and organisations out there still paying ransomware, which is not a good thing. We don't want to encourage it, but it is still happening, and they haven't worked out particularly whether they should or not, or what they're going to do. And you can see there just roles and responsibilities, which I'm going to cover a little bit more of, absolutely go out the window. They just, they're not covered. So the emotional phases we see, I think this all makes sense to you, right? Like denial, panic, anger, finger pointing, particularly in a multi-vendor environment. Sitting there, it's not us, it's you. Oh no, it's them over there. No, it's you. Like everyone's just all chaotic and nobody wants to take responsibility. Nobody wants to be on the government media releases that says that they were part of that particular security incident or had some role in it. And then of course there's the refocus and back to normal. That bottom line there is very much about the reaction to stress. So the fight or flight. So you will have a lot of people in our cybersecurity teams who go into fight mode, right? And you can imagine just how intense and hostile that can be, but also that can be productive as well. But then you've got those that just tune out, that just go, I don't think I want to be here, I don't like this. And they're not the ones that you give critical tasks to, obviously. But still, I see teams trying to do it, trying to shake that person and go, get them to do this, and they're critical for that. That person starts disappearing, they start not being on the calls, they start not showing up. That is a real thing. Has anyone seen that in the incidents that you've been involved in? That some people just tune out? Yep, yeah. So we've got to be really mindful of that too, because then our roles and responsibilities again go out the window. So here's an example of something recently that happened. Security team member picked up a malware infection in a server, right? So they went, okay. They reported it from the SOC analyst to the endpoint security team. There was no research done yet about the malware infection. And then they had a monthly call where they wrapped up all the incidents, usually the P2, P3 downwards, to the CISO. And they announced to the CISO that Fred can't come to the phone because he's dealing with a ransomware incident. Now, I'm a CISO as well, the thing I didn't mention, so I'm part of those calls. So when I'm on one of those calls, and this is a client, not DXC, but when I'm on one of those calls, right, I'm not expecting you to throw that to me. What do you think is going to happen when you are in a normal meeting and then you go and say, hey, there's malware infection and it's ransomware, straight away to an exec? Anyone want to tell me from the audience? What's going to happen? Panic. There we go. Panic. It reminds me of the COVID toilet paper thing. I thought that was an appropriate picture. Unnecessary panic. 6 hours later, only 6 hours later, I was identified as crypto mining software. Now, yeah, that's bad, but it's not ransomware. And they were able to kick it out. And it wasn't a P1, it was a P2, or perhaps even lower. Google could have identified it. Some of our junior people went on to Google. So unnecessary, not following a process, and panic. And that's where we come here to this lack of experience, right? So we didn't have people that understood what that was. They just saw malware and went, oh, it's got to be ransomware. Right, just jump directly to a conclusion. And that can happen when you have people coming in fresh to the organisation, people coming in from another industry perhaps that they've moved into cyber, or younger people who are not seasoned in this space yet. So it's something to really think about. The lack of practice. I was in a session yesterday where they asked how many people did their playbooks, business continuity plans at least once a year, and nearly everyone put up their hand. So is that the same here? Does everyone do their playbooks, incident response, tabletop exercise at least once a year? Yeah? Oh, a few don't. What about more than once a year? Anyone do them twice? Yeah, good. 3 times? No. Oh, yeah, one up the back. That's really good. So the playbooks give you muscle memory. They give you the ability, the practice, to be able to see exactly what's going to happen with different scenarios. Okay, so how does that make sense? There was a female CISO that I worked with in a significant government department, significant federal government department. And we did all the playbooks and we put everything together based on roles and responsibilities. And she said, now, I'm going to go on leave and I want you to run a simulation. Oh, that's interesting. I've not seen that before. So we did. And what do you think happened? Yeah, it fell apart, complete chaos, because it had been written with her in mind. How does she think? What's her governance? What's her response going to be? So even though the role was there, she wasn't directing and running everything. And she could have been sick that day, right? She might have been overseas on a holiday that day. So also think about when you're doing that, don't have, like people go, oh, you've got to have everyone in the room. You've got to have all the execs. You've got to have your CFO if you're doing an exec one. You've got to have everyone in there. We need them all in there. Well, actually, let's just see what happens if one of them's not in there. So that's why we need to do practice for all the different scenarios. And the tech proficiency. So we can't be across everything all of the time. In my team, we deal with Splunk, QRadar, AUSCERT, Darktrace, Sentinel, Rapid7, like the list goes on. We can't expect everyone to be technically proficient in everything, right? We all know that we just can't be across everything from an end-to-end capability perspective. So the tech proficiency is that thing when you look back at that example I gave you, they did not understand what the crypto mining software was. So the tech proficiency was lacking there. And again, a lack of process. So that should not have been announced on that call to that CISO that there was a ransomware infection. That was not the process. So that was a bit of panic, went out the window, so a lack of process. So they're the 4 kind of things that occur when we've got panic going on in this space that we see on the ground. So we've got to make sound decisions amongst all of this, and it's not easy to do. With all this panic and pressure, you know, how do we make a good decision? And I want to give you an example of, has anyone watched the movie Speed? I think it's an 80s, 90s movie, yeah? Keanu Reeves. Okay, the movie, for those of you who aren't aware of it, is that Keanu Reeves plays this character, Jack. And Jack has been, very active in, ransomware, with hostage negotiations, and, really one of the good guys that, tries to make sure that everything's kept nice and safe and secure. Jack's had a bit of a baddie from his previous life, and this guy's out to get him. So what this guy does is he sets some explosives on a bus full of people, just ordinary everyday citizens, and if the bus goes less than 50 miles per hour, the bomb goes off and everyone dies. Okay? So pretty significant scenario. Now, put that to one side. Earlier in the movie, before that happened, Jack was given a scenario, and it was a training scenario. Does anyone remember this scenario? Yeah, a few of you? So don't give the answer. So he was given this scenario that you've got a bad guy, he's got a hostage, he's at the gates of the airport, and he is looking like he's going to escape. You're 100 feet away. What do you do? What is your decision? He's under pressure, he's got a hostage. What do you do? Can anyone tell me what Jack suggested? Yep, at the back. Shoot the hostage. Yep. He said, shoot the hostage. Now, the general ethical response to that from a human perspective is, whoa, hang on. We're not supposed to be doing that. If you shoot the hostage and take out the bad guy, problem goes away. Now, I'd like to liken that to the data assets that you have, or even the systems or the networks that you have, right? You have to take it seriously. You can't sacrifice those. And what you can't sacrifice from the ethical perspective is the impact they have on the flow and impact that has to your customers, to your stakeholders, to the people who've got the PII, the PHI. Like, you just can't do it. And yet I do see people out there not taking that as seriously. They're not seeing that as a potential hostage situation, or if they are, they go, look, let's just shoot it, put it to one side and we'll just keep moving on. It's really not that important. And I see that, and some of you are probably a bit shocked, but it happens. So we need to make sure we're not shooting the hostage. We need to make sure that we've got a great environment where it's a difficult, complex, challenging, scary at times, but an environment where we can make these good decisions. So as part of that, a lot of you, I think, will be aware of cognitive bias. I think I tend to bring this up in a lot of talks. But cognitive bias is well and truly alive in cybersecurity, particularly in security operations centres and incident response teams. So it's essentially a mental heuristic where we go to a known, right, a bias that is very comfortable for us. So for example, a groupthink. You might hear it as echo chamber, but everybody decides this is the way we're going to move forward because everyone is of a similar background, similar experience, and so they all decide this is how we're going to move forward. When we have a cybersecurity incident, that might not necessarily work. I've had situations where the CISO has been absolutely adamant to me that this is the way we need to go because it's a nation-state actor, and we all agree that it's a nation-state actor, but actually it wasn't. It was actually a kid in a basement, not necessarily the basement, in the bedroom, that was hacking them, and that all their playbooks and everything were wired for the nation-state actor because that was what the bias they had, was who they thought were going to be out to get them. If you have a look at the anchoring effect, anchor to the information that's immediately available, and then I don't move from it. How many times have we seen that in security incident where someone's like, no, I've got this information, it's the one that's available to me, it's what I'm using. They're not open to other conversations, discussions, and other recommendations. I'm just going to pick a few out here. The ostrich effect is usually the person I said before who's flatlined, starts not turning up to meetings and is checked out. They've just put their head in their sand like an ostrich does and says this isn't happening. And I think a big one here really is the demotivating effect, right? So we get demotivated when we don't see good decisions being made, we don't trust our executives, we don't trust other people on the team, and we don't trust the vendors in there. So we start to get demotivated, then everyone gets demotivated, and then it just becomes bigger than Ben-Hur. And I see that quite a lot. So I think in order to make good decisions, and in other talks I've been able to go right into mapping this to actual decisions made in SOCs, but it'll be here for another 40 minutes doing that. But be aware of these biases. Have a think about yourself. If you've been in a security incident or an escalation, have a think about your team. What's one of these you think from the audience here that might have cropped up that you've seen? Just an example. And don't be shy. Yep, exactly. Yep. Any others? Confirmation bias. Yep. So you can start mapping these to your own experience, and that way you can start avoiding them. So these are other typical challenges we see, and these are all avoidable. Focusing on unverified information and cherry picking what you want. No clear prioritisation, lack of understanding. How many times I go in there and people do not understand the interdependencies? Paralysis and risk aversion. I was on a call 2 days ago with a CISO and there was a breach, and I'm on the call with this person and we'd worked out a plan, and they said, who's going to take this to the executive? And I'm the third party vendor. I'm like, well, it's you. And they went, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I know. Can you do it? I said, well, no, that's your job. And so there's this huge lack of decision making under pressure. People don't want to be seen to be responsible, and they don't like being the bearer of bad news. No one here likes to be the bearer of bad news. Right? So in an incident, you're going to be bearing a lot of bad news, and you've got to make sure that that person is going to, fulfill their role and do that. I was a bit shocked. It's the first time I'd seen that one, but Team gets exhausted, no rostering. I think we see that a lot. I also see unhealthy teams where we're bringing in pizza and chips and takeaway, and after about a week, that's possibly not a good thing. And I'll just go over a few of these, but we all know the bad credential hygiene and the risks of that. I have seen, under pressure, a team put a password on a post-it in a security operations centre, not ours, but I've seen that in a client's, in the OT space. So in OT particularly, when they're not as mature, I've seen that happen where they've just gone, I'm tired, here's the password, and handed it over, right? So these things are happening. Time pressure from the business. So the executives are like, give me the information. I need to go out to the media. I need to meet my 90-day obligation period. Tell me what's going on. And you haven't done the forensics yet, right? You don't even know potentially whether you can do it or whether you need someone to come in and help you with it. You don't know the extent of the problem, and there's pressure from executives. And so it's really bad to be making decisions in that moment, but you feel like you need to. And that lack of understanding, I've had that a bit this last few days about when you should report something. So when you identify the issue, the regulatory clock starts ticking. And it's not the 90th day that you hand the information in. You should be getting it into them before if you can. Now, I did see a session yesterday where they were talking about the assumption of data mining. Do you just bring in a data mining company for a data breach, right? And then they'll go sort it out. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I've never seen a client that wants to pay for a data mining company. I've never seen a client that wants their data offshore because it's a lot of data. And the breaches I've seen, and you think about the companies I work with, it's significant. So data mining was an assumption made, and it's a good idea, but I've not seen it happen, and I've not seen anyone really be able to, like by about day 80, go, we're really clear on what this is and hand it over and feel like legal are across it and everything's all good. Like we're always skimming to the line, right? So there's a lot of pressure on us in that space. Missing backups, still in today's day and age, missing backups. And data recovery fails. And it's just so time consuming, I think we all know, with the data recovery fails. So some of the lessons learned. One of the lessons learned actually was interesting with Mask. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Mask security incident quite a few years ago. I think it was 2019. And one of the things I learned from that was that they had all these communication channels in their playbooks and all the different governance and approval processes. And yet everyone went and set up, back then, now I think it would be Signal, but back then WhatsApp groups. And they all went and set up comms channels against those WhatsApp groups, and they didn't reflect the playbooks or what had been agreed or decided on. And one of the really key things that Mars did in their lessons learned was they then set up their new communications channels and backed it up against those comms channels because they were the ones that worked. So people weren't following the proper processes that were agreed and approved, but they did follow a process that worked. And I think they were able to get up quite quickly. So it's really good for your lessons learned to be able to build that back into what your new processes will look like. Look, a lot of these, you can see in the red, I've mapped the human element. So compromised credentials in the environment, just be aware of bias, don't jump to conclusions. You can see there, depending on the actor's goal, the group could have sold access into the environment to other criminals. We always have to assume that. So when you're looking at ransomware, you have to really think about that behaviour and that concept of trust. You need to know your reporting obligations for exfiltration of confidential data. The threat actor may still be the environment. Do you know how many people I've seen them go, oh, what? They're not calm about that. What? But they're still there? Sometimes you leave them there because you want to see what they're doing. You want a bit more information about them. And then the forensics, I've seen the forensics teams go, we just don't kick them out just yet because they'll know we kicked them out and I actually need to see a bit more information and data. So I want to watch them for a little bit longer. So you've got to remain calm because I have seen a CISO just go completely ballistic about the fact that we were leaving the threat actor in there for a little bit longer and not understanding. So just remain calm and understand the context. Take the time to reflect and to think about why that decision is being made. Backups, should be secured and isolated, but with restored systems, you should always assume the threat actor persistence can be restored as well. And I see a lot of people think, oh, well, we'll just do the backup and we'll restore that and it'll be good. And I think you all know this, right? That it is not necessarily the case. And then people go, well, we'll go greenfields and build it again. Well, that takes time, that takes money, and it's not necessarily the best approach either. So you really have to think through those decisions that are being made and the reflection and the biases behind that. I do think you should get external IR help. Like, we don't get called in until about day 2. So I said 1 to 2 days in. We just don't get called in from day 1, which is interesting. So we get called in when it's already a little bit messy and everyone's gone, we can't do this, because everyone thinks they can do it themselves and everyone thinks it's expensive to bring in IR. But the expense and the cost of not bringing it in is a lot more, and the risk, than when you do bring it in. So you should already have identified who they are. Now, I have been out to a bunch of clients where we don't do the IR, and I've said, who is your IR provider? Because we want to make sure that they're across the environment and the systems, and they go, oh, we don't have one yet. Or we have a panel of 5 that we could call in, but I don't know who they are. And we were called in on one quite recently. I didn't know the client, I didn't know the environment, and none of my team did either, but we were on a panel, right? Sure. So we then had to jump in and save that and solve it, but nobody, didn't have anybody, and they went, well, we think that they can do a really good job. So probably bring in those that know your environment. It's really important. Now, the roles and responsibilities. Your playbook can say the CEO is the media spokesperson, but what if your CFO is really charismatic, really well at being media trained, really calm, but your CEO is a bit of an extrovert and a bit out there and likes a bit of chaos and likes to have a party? Who do you think's the best person?
Definitely the CEO.
So the roles and responsibilities, we have to do those, right, against roles and responsibilities. In an incident, don't accept that it's necessarily that person that fronts the media. And this was covered by, I think it's Anthony Karuna, not yesterday, but the day before as well, which I thought was interesting. Get the right person in front of media, get the right person in front of the board, make sure they're calm, make sure they've got the right messaging, and don't let them give too much information. So you don't want the person that's in your incident response team in front of the media. You want someone that's a bit removed from it as well, because you want them to genuinely say, I'll get back to you, or I'll take that on notice. You don't actually really want them knowing too much, because they might then give away too much. So when you're making these decisions under pressure, you need to have the playbooks, you need to have the roles and responsibilities, but you also need to be flexible and to make a good decision about what's best for the organisation. So don't necessarily follow everything to the letter. Be flexible and open. I think we all know the Pareto principle of 80-20. I see most incident responses, you do have success when you have the 80-20s. 80% is the existing playbook. Tend to be very technical, not good enough on the comms side of it, and we need to build more of that up. But you can do that by doing them more often. And so what does good look like? So be aware of bias. Build bias into your playbooks. Practice, practice, practice. Support is needed from your executives. You need them to say you're doing a good job. You need the recognition. You need the respect from them. I don't always see that. I see a lot of pressure about give me this, give me that, give me all the information. So you need to make sure your executives understand the pressure you're under. Psychological support should be factored in. Now, Dr. Carla, I noticed as I walked in, still has 2 sessions this afternoon. Now, if I could put all of my team, and some of my team are in here, so you should go see her. If I could put all of my team in with a psychologist, you think I wouldn't? Like, you need to go get that support, particularly in an incident. You need calm teams, you need clear roles and responsibility, understanding it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? We're not in here for a day or 2, we're in here for weeks or months. Rest and rosters and clarity on the reporting. So it's all really simple. It seems quite simple, but it doesn't happen. And so we need to make sure we're aware of this, we're aware of the human role, and that we're not just relying on the technological perspective. I'm wrapping up now. At the back of this slide deck, and I think you all get a copy of it, if not, reach out to me. We've got some particular resources that can help you. So the one that I really like is the Ransomware Survival Guide, Recovering from an Attack. They're both DXC ones, those PDFs. But that CISO for Musk, he's really good. That talk is really good. So if you listen to that, I think you'll really like it. So sometimes I think one of the best things to do is just to practice, to be across everything in terms of, I mean, we can't be across every cyber attack, right? But be across the ones that maybe are the most likely to hit your organisation or the most similar in industry, and then make sure that you go and have a look at the lessons learned. I would love to be getting a copy of some of the things out there. I think Optus is the one that, is quite in the media. 7 days ago, they were still refusing to hand that over. We need to share more of it. But try and grab, Department of Parliamentary Services are really good as well. They've got a whole bunch of data on what happened to them and lessons learned. Try and get hold of as many lessons learned as you can. Get your executives to build the human side into it, and stop doing your playbooks just once a year. They've got to be done more than that, and they're not just technical. You've got to have the roles, responsibility, comms. You've got to do challenges like the government CISO I said that went on leave. You've got to challenge people so that we get the right response. So that's it from me. That is not a dodgy QR code. You can link to me on LinkedIn through that. I know we were talking about that this morning. But yeah, any questions? Because I believe I'm between you and lunch.
Yes, but we do have a bit of time. I'm sure everyone's keen to get some. A lot of the questions, as expected, are around the people affected and how they react. So Cam has asked, or he said, it seems to be a common trend that organisations experiencing a major incident have a lot of staff fallout. We saw that with Optus, we've seen that with others. Should staff have their job on the line because of incident response? I think it's a loaded question, but how do we prevent staff having their jobs on the line as a result of incident response?
Yeah, look, I think we need greater awareness for the executive about the pressure and the stress. And if you do more playbook incidences where they're really put on the spot, they'll start to understand the quantification of you being put on the spot and what you're going through. So I think it's just keep raising awareness and getting your execs involved so that they don't start finger pointing at the staff about not making good decisions. They understand the pressure they're under.
That leans nicely into one of the other questions, which was around you've got to have the right people to communicate. How do we protect the seniors that are trying to fix the situation and are the natural ones to report back to the execs, so they're pulled from pillar to post and conflicted, and it's that, how do we manage those comms in and out to protect the people that are doing their jobs?
Yeah, it's so important, right? I see the incident response teams are trying to get the information to the CISO, who's trying to get it to the CIO, who's trying to get it to the executive, who's trying to get it to the board, then the media's there, then the comms team are there. There's pressure everywhere. I think in terms of protection, I'm going to go back to this by rote, but the more and more you have muscle memory and the more and more you exercise it and the more and more you build it into your business continuity, into your playbooks, the more and more they'll understand your role and the importance of that. I also think that we should have conflict resolution models built into our thinking as well. I could do a whole talk on that too, but there are ways to impart information. So like that CISO that was saying to me, well, who's going to take this information up? That person was obviously really scared about the repercussions on them.
Did you win
them
over?
And so they need to feel safe, right? We need to make them feel safe.
Yeah. Did you coach them into being able to do it?
I did. And one of the things that I was able to coach them into, I think it's the Danish or the Dutch word for cyber is actually safe.
Yeah.
And so I always see it as, I do a lot of work in OT and IT and safety, so I always try and build that whole safety of people in there too, and that's also their mental health.
We've got a few more around sort of the differences within people and within regions. So Jack has asked, do you see differing trends around bias and approaches to IR across different regions you work with?
Absolutely. So I don't want to name them, but there's a particular country that I look after where I just sit there and go, whoa, that would be an immediate HR case in Australia, right? And I've had to learn that that's actually a normal way of processing and thinking. So when we have multi-geographies, it gets really complex, and particularly when we're dealing with big global firms, so they might have a manufacturing plant in Japan, but then actually the headquarters are run out of America. There's very different kind of cultures in that as well. That's got to be built into the playbooks, and you've got to do them against multi-geographies. I think I probably could have almost called this like get your playbook right, but you have to practice it.
And both Claire and Jack have asked how to get better engagement with execs for the tabletop so that they're actually ready for this when it happens.
Yeah, so I think what you need to do is make sure that they're time poor. I'm time poor. My diary books out 3 to 4 weeks in advance, and people get cranky with that. But what I think you need to do is just have 2 to 3 hours, right? Don't have any more than that. Just 2 to 3 hours with the execs so that they understand. Like I said before, don't try and get everyone's diaries aligned so everybody's in there, because we actually want to see in a real life situation, not everybody's going to be in that room. So how that pans out. So I think the best way to get execs actually aligned and understanding is to run one, to try and run a very short, sharp one. You're not going to get them for longer than 2 or 3 hours. So that's the best you can do. That's what you've got to do.
Awesome. And Yashashvin has asked, how do you balance the benefits of a technical team but the disadvantages of groupthink and cognitive bias, and how do you support and build an optimal workforce?
Around all the different biases, so they build the workforce. Look, we're diverse, right? We have to be open to diversity of thinking as well. That's what good decisions are made with diversity of thinking. We've seen that more and more in cybersecurity, where we've had a lot more diversity in that space. So I think we just need to be aware of cognitive bias. I think you need to do a bit in your teams with it if you can. And the more awareness we have, the more diversity we have, the better decisions.
And I guess this will probably be the final one from Patrick. In your experience, do reactions to an incident, with fight, flight, panic, differ within the same person in different scenarios, or do they tend to be fairly regimented and predictable within the teams you deal with? Yeah,
so different people react differently. So if one of my kids is hospitalised, one of my kids was hospitalised about 2 weeks ago, I'm really calm and rational in a cybersecurity incident. I get it. I know what to do. But if one of my kids is hospitalised, I'm like, oh my God, I'm that mum that's like, oh, I gotta go, and racing to the hospital and going through the door in emergency and then trying to act all cool like, I'm not that mum, but I do panic a bit. So different scenarios, people have different triggers. So you can't necessarily pick it. What you've got to do is do the playbooks again and the incident response again to see how they're reacting in that moment. And it could also be based on something that's happening in their life. They could just be overwhelmed. They might be fine normally, but there's too much going on in their life. They're overwhelmed, they're stressed, and they're not making good decisions, and they just want to disconnect because it's just too much for them. And I think we need to give them the space to be able to do that. And we have to build in, into what we're doing that will happen. And that's why I wanted to point it out to you, because I see it. I go in there and people are like, Fred won't go to the meeting. He's not coming to the meeting. It's like, I can see Fred's disengaged. He's freaked out. He's gone into flight mode. So we just have to write Fred off. Sounds terrible. We have to go put him in a box over there, and maybe he'll be fine the next time.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for these awesome insights. I'll be booking our next tabletop this afternoon to get back on track. But if you could all join me in thanking Kylie.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.